everyone. My name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 3, Episode 4.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. On today's episode, we're going to continue where we left off in the book Journeys Out of the Body by Dr. Robert Monroe, the creator of the Gateway Experience tapes. And in the second half of today's episode, we're going to work through Wave 1, Tape 4, which is titled Release and Recharge. Now, before we get back into the book, I just want to remind everyone that we are still in the very early stages of learning what the Gateway Experience tapes are. We're learning the very basic skills in order to go and do some of the advanced work, things like having an out-of-body experience and doing astral travel. These are advanced skills that we're not actually going to be experiencing for several weeks or maybe even months, right? Because as we go through Mind War Seasons 3, 4, and 5, we're going to cover all of the different 7 waves of the Gateway Experience and work through all 3 of Dr. Monroe's books. So just a reminder that, again, this is the basics. We are doing self-help. We are doing these tapes and listening to these tapes right now as a way to heal the mind, body, and spirit. And I think that is the most important thing that you'll take away from the Gateway Experience, right? That's really why we're here. That's what we're focused on. But as you read through the books and if you're doing research online and stuff, again, there's a lot of controversy and lore and conspiracy that revolves around these tapes. And I don't want us to get distracted by those things, okay? It's important to learn what Dr. Monroe is telling us through these books. These are, his experiences early on, before he ever created the Gateway Experience tapes. That's what he's telling us about. He's exploring on his own. He's doing his own experiments, and he's doing his very best to explain to us what he's found. But he doesn't have any tapes at this point, these things that he's talking to us about. So when you start to listen to the tapes, you may not right away start to experience the same type of things that he does here. And we're going to try to walk through some of these things that he's experiencing and kind of get a better idea of maybe what they really were in those early days. So we're going to pick up on Chapter 5. So in the last episode, we talked about Locale 1. So Locale 1 is basically when you are doing astral travel, when you're doing astral projection, that would be traveling through the real world, the here and now, our current time and space, right? You're going to be visiting locations that are real, they're here on the earth now, and in the time period that we currently are in. Personally, the only astral travel that I've ever done is really been to locations in Locale 1. Real places that I've visited before, that I'm very familiar with. I knew the people that were going to be there at the time I was doing these astral projections, right? Family and friends were there. It was almost like watching a memory, but as a dream, being very conscious and seeing what was going on, right? The best way to describe these experiences and the things that you see are going to be like a dream-like state. But in Locale 1, you are viewing the real world around us. Here and now is what it was called, right? But in chapter 5, Infinity Eternity, Dr. Monroe introduces us to locale 2. So I describe locale 2 as more of the real dream state when you think of dreams, right? When you have a dream, the surroundings that you're in may seem familiar. You might see buildings and furniture or automobiles, or you're outside and you recognize the grass and the trees and things like that. But they're going to be locations that aren't real, that you've never been to. You may even be interacting with people in your life that are real, but it might be different versions of them, right? Or maybe you're interacting with someone who isn't real that you've never met before. And when you're in this locale 2, things can be very strange. They can warp and change in different ways. It's very different than locale 1. Locale 1 still deals with the same realities of our life, right? Still the same physics and all of that type of stuff are in locale 1, even though it still feels like a dream, but locale 2 really feels like you're in that dream state. And that's one part that's interesting is, as you go through the tapes, if you find yourself falling asleep, basically, and you are no longer really conscious to what's going on, you may have just moved into a dream. So when you wake up, you're going to be, writing down and taking your notes, and you might just be almost creating a dream journal. And we want to be conscious of that. It's better to be conscious while you're listening to the tapes, and really having a clear, awake understanding of what you're doing and where you're at. But let's take a look at what Dr. Monroe says here in Chapter 5, Infinity Eternity. Locale 2 is a non-material environment with laws of motion and matter only remotely related to the physical world. It is an immensity whose bounds are unknown to this experimenter and has depth and dimension incomprehensible to the finite conscious mind. In this vastness lie all of the aspects we attribute to heaven and hell. So that's interesting. There is some crossover here between religion, the religious stories that we've been told, right? These are all part of locale 2. It is inhabited, if that is the word, by entities with various degrees of intelligence with whom communication is possible. Again, if you are having a dream, you may see all types of entities, creatures, monsters, whatever they might be, alien-looking beings, and you're communicating with them, but you understand that is just a dream. And so maybe through locale 2, we're able to actually kind of visit this dream world. As noted in the percentile analysis in a later chapter, the fundamentals are altered in locale 2. Time, by the standards of the physical world, is non-existent. There is a sequence of events, a past and a future, but no cyclical separation. Both continue to exist coterminously with the now. Measurements from microseconds to millennia are useless. Other measurements may represent these factors in abstract calculation, but this is uncertain. Laws of conservation of energy, force field theories, wave mechanics, gravity, matter, structure, all remain to be proved by these more versed in such fields. Superseding all appears to be one prime law. Locale 2 is a state of being where that which we label thought is the wellspring of existence. It is the vital creative force that produces energy, assembles matter into form, and provides channels of perception and communication. I suspect that the very self or soul in locale 2 is no more than an organized vortex or warp in this fundamental. As you think, so you are. So again, if any of you have ever been in a dream and have been able to recognize that you're in a dream and started to be conscious in your dream. I've only had this experience a few times. And the few times that I have, the very first thing that I did was started to fly. I started to lift off the ground because I realized where I was. I've always heard you can fly in your dreams, and that was the first thing I did. But it's a perfect example of when you're in locale 2, things are different. It's that dream-like state. So the author here in a few chapters says, or a few paragraphs here, he says, their purpose, so he's talking about different people and entities that he has ran into and communicated with and interacted with in locale 2. He almost talks of it and he says, okay, when I'm in locale 2, the people that I've ran into and that I've communicated with, he describes them as, number one, either being somebody who's asleep. So again, that dream-like world. So somebody who's real in our real world, and they are asleep right now, and they're dreaming. And their second body, they've left their body in their sleeping state, and they've came, and they're in locale 2 having their dreams. And he's saying that he is consciously able to interact with these people who are sleeping. He says this also. He feels like he's ran into people that are maybe high on drugs, right? Who've kind of passed out and they're up there, or possibly people who have just died, okay? Souls that just left their body and now they're kind of in this transitionary place. And he believes that these are some of the people that he's run into. And so now he's talking about those entities or those individuals. And it says their purpose seems to be that of simulation of the physical environment, temporarily at least for the benefit of those just emerging from the physical world after death. So he's talking about the familiarity that you're going to have in locale 2. Again, that idea of, oh, this is a building that I'm in. This is furniture. I'm outside now. There are people here around me. The same familiarity that you would have in a regular dream, you're having it in locale 2. And he's saying that a lot of that may be created, again, for people who have just passed away and who, for maybe the very first time in their life, have ever even thought about what it means to die. A lot of people don't think about these things, and that's an important part of our work. I think a lot of you out there who are listening, you've had these thoughts before. What comes next, right? That's why we're doing this. Is there life after death? And I'm telling you, from what I've experienced, folks, we have a spirit, we have a soul, and it leaves the body and it goes somewhere. And that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. Where does it go? What is this next step, right? We're explorers. We're trying to, through our experimentations, by listening to the tapes, we are exploring what comes next. Dr. Monroe says, in locale 2, reality is composed of deepest desires and most frantic fears. Thought is action, and no hiding layers of conditioning or inhibition shield the inner you from others, where honesty is the best policy because there is nothing less. That's very interesting, okay? Our deepest desires, our most frantic fears. So what happens is when you are in this state of mind, we've heard people talk about ego death, right? Well, the ego, the I, the id, who we are, and all the conditioning that we've had through society and culture, how we were raised, all of those things slip away in this next place, in this place that we're visiting, in the work that we're doing. All of those things slip away. They don't matter anymore because we're trying to get down to the very basics, the truth of who and what we really are. Under the basic standards described above, existence is indeed different. It is this difference that creates the great problems of adjustment even when attempting to visit there while in the second body. The raw emotion is so carefully repressed in our physical civilization, it is unleashed in full force. To say that it is overwhelming at first is a massive understatement. In conscious physical life, this condition would be considered psychotic. Okay, so What he's talking about is when we get into this state of mind, okay, when we leave our body and we are in these other locales working, your emotions are going to be very high. We're allowed to feel them in a different way because we don't have the fear that is associated with being in our life, our physical body. We don't fear physical pain. We don't feel exhaustion. We don't feel any pain that we're having. We're not worried about paying the bills and all that type of stuff. All of those things are gone in these next places. And that's why we go to do the work in these places, because we can do work there without our judgment and our understanding being clouded by normal day-to-day nonsense. And he says this condition is usually in our physical life considered psychotic. Okay. That's an interesting word. A lot of people are normally scared of it, but I'm telling you, as we get into deeper seasons of mind war and start to look into our spiritual world, we will work at becoming a psychotic. It is not a word people should fear. I think they add fear to it in order to keep us away from what it truly means to be psychotic and how to control it, okay? Let's see, Dr. Monroe says, my first visits to Locale 2 brought out all of the repressed emotional patterns I even remotely considered I had, plus many I didn't know existed. They so dominated my actions that I returned completely abashed and embarrassed at their enormity and my inability to control them. Fear was the dominant theme, fear of the unknown, of strange beings, of death, of God, of rule breaking, of discovery, and of pain, to name only a few. Such fears were stronger than the sexual drive for union, which, as noted elsewhere, was in itself a tremendous obstacle. So again, Dr. Monroe, when we get into these states of being and we do this work, we're able to start really tearing down our fears, our fear of death, our fear of God, this, omnipotent, force in our life that is supposed to be, making sure that we don't break the rules. What are these rules? Why were they created? What is all of this stuff, all this pressure that is put on us by society and culture and all the silly stories that we've been told for thousands of years? All of those things, they don't matter in this next state of being, in our second state when we're visiting these other locales. They can disappear and you can start to deal with the reality of our emotions. We can deal with our pain, right? So it's, again, I've said before, if you are someone who is in physical pain, listening to the Gateway Experience is an amazing way to have just a short time to where you're no longer feeling your physical pain because your body is completely asleep. It's deeply relaxed. All of those sleep chemicals have been pushed out of through your body, and you're not feeling pain anymore, but your mind is still wide awake and conscious, and you're able to think without the physical pain. And for some people, it might be the first time in years that they're able to do that. And having that ability to think clearly without your physical pain, distracting you, it's very important. One by one, painfully and laboriously, the exploding, uncontrollable emotional patterns had to be harnessed. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to have these emotional outbursts, these floods of emotional, emotions that maybe we didn't even quite understand that we had. And as they flood into us, we're going to harness them one at a time. We're going to control them and understand. Until this was accomplished, no rational thought was possible. Without rigorous consistency, they began to return. It is much like a slow learning from insanity to calm, objective reasoning. An infant learns to be civilized in its growth through childhood to adult status. I suspect the same thing occurs all over again in the adaptation to Locale 2. If it doesn't happen during physical life, it becomes the first order of business upon death. This implies that the areas of Locale 2 nearest the physical world in vibratory frequency. So again, we hear about these frequencies. You've seen tons of videos about it, other podcasts talking about it. So now we're talking about the physical vibrations that make up our physical world. We know they're out there. Cells kind of vibrate, and that's how they, interact with each other and hold their form. It all seems to be vibration at some level. And locale 1 and locale 2, they have close vibrational frequencies to our real world. That's why they feel real. That's why it's very familiar when we go to these places. Let's see. People, for the most part, with insane or near insane, emotionally driven beings. For the most part, this seems to be true. They include those alive but asleep or drugged and out in their second bodies, and quite probably those who are dead but still emotionally driven. There is evidence to support the former, and later seems possible. So again, that's him describing the people that he's running into, people who maybe had just passed away, things like that. Now again, we're not there yet. I personally, the only real beings that I've ever encountered throughout my gateway experience tape process, all throughout my work here, has either been directly the people in locale 1 who are here, they're still alive, my family, my friends, and I was seeing them as they were going about their day, right? When I came to visit, I would always visit during some type of an event where I know it wasn't going to be their personal time, but they were going to be with others in a social group, right? And they're there, they're real, right? So that's very different than, working with entities or groups with people you don't know. Now, the only other, again, people or entities that I've experienced were 4 of my 5 grandparents. I have 5 grandparents. One was a step grandparent, right? And one of the 5 is still alive. She wasn't there when I was visited by my grandparents who had passed, right? And when I saw them and when they were near me, they weren't anything like the people in my life that I visited through astral travel that are still alive today. They were there in real life, in 4K, bright, real. I could see them just like it was a movie. But my grandparents who had passed, when I interacted with them, it really was just more their soul. It was just kind of like a feeling. It was in darkness, so they were dark, but you could kind of see a light around them. It was more just feeling that they were there. It was very comforting, very loving. It was amazing, right? And these are the type of things that I think are maybe a little more realistic than some of the stories that we hear Dr. Monroe talk about. But again, he was learning these things very early on, right? It's great as you read through this because he wasn't listening to any tapes. He didn't have tapes yet. So as he was falling asleep and taking naps, he was walking himself through the hypnosis, counting to 10 by himself. And then when he would feel the vibrations come on as he was starting to fall asleep, one of the things he talks about is the way that he would get out of his physical body is he would literally, as he's laying there, maybe on his left side, he would roll to the right in his mind. And sometimes it wouldn't work. He wouldn't be asleep enough to be able to roll out. But then other times his spirit would roll right out of that physical body. And now you realize, oh, wait, I'm not in my physical body anymore. I've rolled out of it. And now I can go travel and project and move through these different locales. And these are all things that we're going to learn as we go through future tapes. There's a whole process where he teaches us to roll in different directions, and it feels amazing. Let's continue on here. So here it says, the greatest difficulty is the inability of the conscious mind, trained and conditioned in a physical world, to accept the existence of this infinite locale too. Our young Western mental sciences tend to deny its existence. Our religious affirm that in it in a broad, distorted abstraction. Accepted sciences contradict such a possibility and can find no supporting evidence through their instruments of research and measurement. Okay, so what he's saying here is that science is unable to measure the dream world, the world that we go into when we dream. That's locale 2. That's, in my opinion, the best way to describe it. Again, locale 1 is our physical world that we visit with our spiritual body, but locale 2 is the dream world, where now we're able to visit this kind of dream state and things are familiar, but we can kind of have more control over them too. Really, your imagination is allowed to create things that you're seeing, right? Very important. But it's interesting, he says science can't measure it, but religion alludes to it, right? And really, religions today, especially here in the West, they don't want nothing to do with this stuff. They don't want you talking about it. They're going to think it's evil. They're going to think it's demonic. They're going to think you're some kind of Satan worshiper, even talking about this type of stuff, right? They're going to say, nope, you can't talk about it. It's just not real. It's not true. But then at the same time, they say, oh yeah, when you die, you're going to go to heaven, this next place. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're trying to explain what is heaven? What is this next step that we're going to go into? What are these next layers of locales that we're going to experience after we die, right? Let's see, it says, I suspect that many, most or all human beings visit locale at some time during the sleep state. So again, locale 2 is the dream world. That's where we go when we're sleeping, okay? So in chapter 6, we're going to move to chapter 6 now. Dr. Monroe starts talking about locale 3, all right? And he says this, okay? This might be the best way to describe it. He says that he saw a window or a hole, and he says, as he looked through it, there was nothing but blackness. It was not the blackness of a dark room, but a feeling of infinite distance and space, as if I were looking through a window into distant space. I felt that if my vision were good enough, I could probably see nearby stars and planets. My impression, therefore, was of deep outer space beyond the solar system, far and an incredible distance. Okay. This is a perfect description. But I want to start from the beginning, okay? When we are in the early stages like we are now, wave 1, wave 2, this blackness that we find ourselves in, I've described it to you before as in the upside down world of Stranger Things. If you watch that show, I think it's a perfect descriptor. It's a training ground for us. It's our training center. And I like to think of that as sleep locale. That's the very first place we're going to go, and that's where we really spend the majority of our time, is in this darkness where our body is asleep, but we haven't left our body yet. We haven't projected and went to any other location. We're still kind of in our physical area, right? We're still near our body. Or even when we start to float out of our body a little bit, we're still in this very close, near to our physical body. And then again, locale 1 is where now you leave your body, you disconnect from it, and now you're able to visit the real world. I've done this multiple times, right? You see and feel yourself floating outside of your body, just a few feet above. In the beginning, you're connected with an umbilical cord. You literally feel it. Because at first it's kind of scary. You feel yourself floating away and you're like, wait a minute, how do I return? But then it's like a leash or something, right? You can feel a connection from your brain, your spirit brain, to your physical brain. And you just kind of float there in the beginning. And it's very amazing to kind of feel this at first, these first few times, right? But then when you disconnect, now, I've done this multiple times. You kind of float through the roof, and now you're floating above your home and you're looking at the city around you. Now that's locale 1. You're looking at the real physical world. And again, why is this possible? In my opinion, it's imagination. I mean, you're wide awake right now. You're totally conscious. If I told you to close your eyes and imagine yourself floating above your home and looking around at your surroundings, your neighborhood, your city that you live in, you could do that. And I think that's what this really is. When you're in this kind of locale 1, is you're imagining the places in reality, imagining places that you've already been and can imagine while you're conscious. What's interesting with locale 1 is, again, this is where the conspiracy theories come in, where the military and the intelligence agencies try to use these tapes in order to spy on our adversaries. I think that's very true. I think that could be very real. And again, they are tasked with visiting places that they might not be familiar with. Again, all things that I hope that as we go through these tapes and we go through future exercises and experiments on our own, all things that I hope we can experiment and share with each other. Again, if you're having these experiences, if you're learning new things while you are astral traveling, while you're listening to the tapes, make sure you leave some comments and contact me. Contact other people that are listening to the tapes so we can share these things, right? So again, I think Dr. Monroe describes it perfectly what locale 3 is. So again, we start at locale sleep, right? Just this darkness, this training center where we're able to learn new tactics and techniques to heal the mind, body, and spirit. Again, the self-help, that's what we're doing here. Next, you can go to locale 1, you're astral projecting into the real world, right? You can go further and you can astral project into locale 2, which is this dream world where things are very different. They might seem familiar, but you have the ability to kind of control and use your imagination to make things happen and appear. And now he's saying that locale 3 is back into the darkness, but a deeper darkness, an infinite darkness far outside of our universe. And when it comes to family and friends, where I try to describe what this feels like, I've said it's literally the abyss outside of our universe. So if you think of yourself getting into a spaceship, a rocket ship, right? And you take off in one single direction and you fly as fast and as far as you can, eventually you're going to work your way out of our galaxy. You're going to see all the planets and stars that make up our universe. And eventually you're going to leave our universe also. And you're going to go out into that infinite darkness that is our reality outside of our physical universe. And you can think of yourself looking back behind you or looking in the rear view mirror of your spaceship, and you see the universe behind us. The lights start to fade of our planets. And now you're out into total darkness. This is locale 3. This is very comforting. This is a place that is just amazingly just warm and comfort and just peace and tranquility. A lot of people might be scared to think about this being in complete darkness, but it's not. I believe that that is more familiar to our spirit body than being here in a world filled with light. I think light and the 5 senses that we deal with, I think these are all foreign to our spirit bodies, right? But when we're in the darkness, that's where we really belong. And I know that sounds scary. People tell us to stay away from the darkness and go towards the light and all that stuff. I don't know. I don't know. And maybe we'll find some of those answers further. But I think that's what locale 3 really is, that deep darkness, the abyss, that space beyond our universe. Now, here's where we run into some trouble, because throughout the rest of this chapter, chapter 6, called Reverse Image, sorry if I didn't mention that earlier, again, chapter 6, Reverse Image, the rest of what Dr. Monroe talks about is how he's floating there in the darkness and all of a sudden a window appears. And he looks through the window and he sees in a completely different world around him, right? He pulls his head out of the window and looks around, and he's back there in the darkness. He puts his head through the window, and now he sees this whole world, people, buildings, roads, all kinds of things. They're not quite the same as our current reality. The roads are different, the vehicles are different, the houses are different, the people are a little bit strange, but it's still this world where he was able to visit it over and over again and go through the window and kind of experience life with these people, right? But I don't think that's what Locale 3 is. Here's what I think happened. I think Dr. Monroe got to Locale 3, which is again that darkness, the abyss. That's where we're going to do a lot of work. And I think what he saw was a window back into Locale 2, right? Into a dream world that he was creating with his imagination. That's why he was able to revisit it over and over and over again, because he was purposely, through these experimentations, wanting to go visit this place. So what is that going to do to you? As you fall asleep, you're going to be thinking about this place that you want to go visit, that you've made up in your mind, this whole world that you've created, the same way that any author creates the amazing worlds that we find in Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. The authors have created these wild, fantastical worlds, and you can revisit them over and over and over again by reading the books, watching the movies, playing the video games, right? You can immerse yourself back into this fake world. So I think that's maybe what Dr. Monroe did, because he says that Locale 3 is the place inside the window. I disagree. Locale 3 is the abyss, the darkness, right? It's not the dark training center, the sleep locale that we're in right now. These are these first stages where we're learning the basics, okay? As you listen to the tapes, that's where you're going to be. You're going to be in your sleep training center again, your sleep dojo. That's the word I'm looking for, right? That's a great way to think about it. But you haven't left your body yet. You'll know when it's time to leave, right? Dr. Monroe walks us through leaving the body and then projecting ourselves into Locale 3. He literally does it with the sounds of a spaceship. It sounds like you're in a rocket ship shooting off into the darkness of the abyss, right? So again, we're not quite there yet, but just to reiterate where we are, we got the sleep locale. This is that training center, the sleep dojo. That's where we're starting. That's where we're at now in these early stages, wave 1 and wave 2. Then you can astral project into Locale 1, the here and now, the reality, where you can visit real places on Earth and real people that are alive today and observe what they're doing at this current moment in time. Locale 2 is again that dream world, where now you've moved into this world where you can use your imagination to change things. Things are slightly off, but they're still sort of familiar, right? And then Locale 3 is where now you have exited the body and your spirit has flown so far. It is now out into this darkness, this very calming, comforting, warming, welcoming darkness. There is no fear. There is no pain. It's very peaceful. It's an amazing place to then do your extended work, right? To do advanced training and advanced learning, okay? So again, folks, today we read through chapters 5 and 6 of Journeys Out of the Body, right? And when we return, we're going to do a deep dive into Wave 1, Tape 4, which is titled Release and Recharge, after we return from a word from our sponsors.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War.
Welcome back, folks. So let's dive right into wave 1, which is called Discovery, and tape 4, which is titled Release Recharge. This is a very powerful tape. I think it's one that you could revisit once in a while, but I don't think it's something that you want to be looking at over and over and over again, because we don't want it to lose its potency, okay? So I've only listened to this tape 3 times. The third time was just a few days ago, and it was amazing. I didn't quite understand what I was going to get from re-listening to it again. I know the first time that I listened to it, I was not really prepared, and it was just like Dr. Monroe talked about, where you're going to deal with emotions on a very raw level. It was very powerful. The second time I listened to it, which was like a year ago now, I was actually kind of afraid of it, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to deal with my emotions, deal with issues that I was having in my life, but it helped at that point. And when I listened to it a few days ago, I really didn't think that there was much to be uncovered, but sure enough, just these emotions and things that I wasn't really conscious of, they bubbled to the top, and I was able to explore them and start to understand them more. So to start out with tape 4, Release Recharge, again, Dr. Monroe walks us through our preparatory process, okay? We've been learning about that. Again, the basics. We're in our sleep dojo. We are going to first do our energy conversion box. Then we're going to do the resonant tuning, then our resonant energy balloon, and then we're going to say our affirmation that we are more than our physical body, and then we are going to walk ourselves into focus 10, okay? So again, Dr. Monroe, he's taught us these preparatory process things. If you are having trouble with them, you're going to want to go back to tapes, 2, tape 3. You're going to revisit them, get the basics again. And now we are starting, we're at focus 10. We're deeply relaxed. We've allowed ourselves to become hypnotized into this deep, relaxed state. We still haven't left our body, nothing like that. We're in the darkness. Our eyes are closed. Our body's completely asleep, and we're in the dojo. We're in our sleep dojo. And so here's what Dr. Monroe is going to do. He's going to have us revisit our energy conversion box. Because remember, at the beginning of the tapes, we're going to put all of our worries, our concerns, our stresses, our fears into our energy conversion box. In this tape, it starts to make you understand what he means by energy conversion. So here's how we do it. Now you will perform the process of energy conversion. You will perform the process of energy conversion, move to your energy conversion box, and raise the heavy lid. Okay, so now, again, we went through the preparatory process. We've already put our worries and fears and concerns in the energy conversion box. We've turned our back on it. We went through the rest of the process. And now he's saying, okay, now it's time to go back. Remember all those things you put in the box earlier that you thought you were just going to forget about? Well, now we're going to address them, okay? That's why this tape is so powerful, right? We're going to lift our heavy lid. Now we're going to perceive inside the box, perceive the radiation of fear, right? This tape, again, very powerful. We're dealing with our fears. So now we look inside our energy conversion box. We see our stress, our concern, our fear, our anger, our upsetness, whatever these emotions are. And we're going to visualize and see the energy of fear. We're going to see it radiating out at us, and we're going to look at it. In the first radiation of fear you encounter, okay, let's see, perceive inside the box, the first radiation you encounter. All right, this is what's interesting. When I went in and listened to this tape a few days ago, I thought I was going to be addressing a few concerns that I had. No. That did not happen. When I got into this state and Dr. Monroe said, look inside your energy conversion box and look at the first radiation or energy fear, it was nothing that I had on my list. It wasn't on my to-do list. I know that. So this was a deep-seated subconscious fear, that a worry that I was having that I wasn't really conscious to. And that was amazing. This is what we're doing. We're uncovering things in our subconscious, and we're going to now deal with them in a conscious way. He says, now pull the fear out. Pull the fear out of the box and move it away from you. Okay. So now we're going to take this fear out, and now we're holding it in front of us. Okay. Because again, you're using your imagination. You're imagining the box in front of you. You're imagining yourself opening the lid and seeing the light come out of it, this fear energy. Now you're going to reach in, but you're going to do it without fear. You do it without fear in this world, in this state of mind, in this state of being. It doesn't bother you. The radiation of this fear doesn't burn your hands, right? It will in the physical world. It'll give us anxiety, and that anxiety will make us stressed out, and our beard will turn gray, and our stomach will be filled with ulcers, and we won't be able to sleep, and we'll eat bad foods, and all the things that come with stress and anxiety and all that, right? That is the physical world pain that is associated with our worries and our concerns. But in this state, in our second state, in our sleep dojo, there's no concern. Those physical senses, those physical elements, there is no fear. We reach into the box, we hold the fear in front of us. Now we're going to let it flow upward and away like a bubble, floating upward in water. Okay. So the best way that I could describe it as he was, walking us through the steps. So for me personally, as soon as he said, let it be like a bubble in water, now I realized, I'm floating in water in the deep depths of water, the darkness. You've seen images from undersea videos and stuff, the darkness of being underwater, like out in the ocean, right? And so now you see this bubble of fear. For me, it was black, right? Again, we're surrounded in black, but you have this bubble in front of you that's kind of moving and floating around, and your fear and your anxiety and the issue that you're going to address is in that bubble. And now you're going to release it, and you're going to allow it to float away, right? And so for me, I was looking down at my box, and when I did, everything was darkness. I knew I was underwater in this deep state. And again, no fear, because your physical body's not there. You're not afraid of drowning. You're not afraid of freezing to death or being eaten by a shark, okay? None of that fear is there because your physical body is not a part of where we're at and what we're doing. So again, in my mind, I'm floating in the deep darkness of the water. I look down at the box. I lifted the fear out. It's radiating. It's dark. And I allow it to float up and float, like a bubble. And as I'm watching it, it's just like when you see a movie, right? When someone's kind of, drowning or whatever, and they look up and they see the light of the sun. They see the rays of light coming down into the water. That's exactly what it was like. As I looked up, I could see this black bubble floating up towards the light and popping. And there dissipated my fear and my concern. And it was amazing because I was able to look at that fear and look at that concern in a clear way for what it truly was and what it truly is in my life. Not all of the things that we add to our worries and add to our concerns, again, because we're not dealing with them with our five senses. We're not dealing with these things with our physical senses, right? We're doing this in a world where we don't have those senses. And so you get to see things differently. And it was amazing because as the bubble popped and it burst, then Dr. Monroe says this: You have perceived out of the box and moved it away, your fear. Let it flow upward and away like a bubble floating upward in water. Now, free of fear and emotion, you're going to perceive the memory, the event that was hidden by the fear and emotion. calmly and serenely retrieve this clean energy and pull it again into you. So now that the fear has dissipated and it's gone, and there is no fear and emotion which scares you from looking at this issue in your life, now you're going to perceive the memory and the event. What was it that created this issue in your life? What event caused this fear and anxiety to continue, right? And now you're going to look at that event, that memory. You're going to actively, consciously be thinking of a memory that you've had in your past that caused the current anxiety, frustration, concern, worry, fear, whatever it is. You're going to see it. You're going to think of that memory. And you can address it and deal with it, again, and see it in a clear mind, right? You're going to calmly and serenely retrieve this memory. But this time, now it's cleaned. It's clear, right? Because you've allowed all of the emotion and fear that was attached to it to float away. So now you see the event for what it really was. And when you do, it loses its power. It's just like when you put your worries and concerns in your energy conversion box and you turn your back on them. It's very powerful to turn your back on fear. It's very powerful to turn your back on the anxieties and concerns that you have. And so now we have visually, consciously, in our imagination, taken this worry, taken this concern, this issue that we're dealing with in life. We've removed the darkness from it, all the pain that's associated with it, and we've allowed it to float away and pop and disperse into the atmosphere and disappear. And now we look at that event calmly and cleanly. We're going to be, again, free from fear and emotion. We're going to retrieve the clean energy now, the clean energy from the memory, the clean energy of the reality of what really happened, and we're going to pull that clean energy into us, right? So now the darkness has the bubble of pain, sadness, worry. It's floated away. The same situation that we've been worried about, now we see it clearly. Now it's glowing with a white light. We understand it for what it really is. We understand how to deal with it. And now we're going to take that healing, clean energy, and we're going to allow it to be absorbed into us, right? These are all visualizations. I know it sounds strange, right? But one of the problems that we have in life is that when we're dealing with an issue, right, that's all we're focused on. We just focus over and over again on the issue. We put all of our reality into it, and our logical thinking goes into it. How can we solve this issue? How can we fix this problem? How can we move into a better Aristos, into the next situation, right? But when we do that, it again, it's through our five senses. It's through our worries, right? Our stomach gets in knots about an issue that we are having at work, because we know that if we don't fix that issue at work, we're not going to get a paycheck. If we don't get a paycheck, we're not going to be able to eat, and then our stomach's going to hurt. Do you see how the pattern works? Do you see how it works, right? Where we allow our worries to affect our physical body, well, guess what? We're going to deal with our issues outside of our physical body, and that's why we can do it. That's what this work is all about. Dealing with the things in our lives outside of our five physical senses. And when you do that, you get a clear understanding, and you get to look at them clearly and deal with them in a way, in a reality that is much different than our own, right? So now turn again to the energy conversion box. Perceive inside. Perceive still another fear. Okay, so this is what tape 4, release and recharge, is all about. Again, go through the preparatory process. Dr. Monroe has us grab our energy conversion box, open the lid, perceive our fear, pick it up, allow the fear, the issue, the concern, the sadness, the anxiety, the depression to float away like a bubble. It floats above us. It hits the surface of the water that we're floating in, and it dissipates and disappears. And then we look back at the event that caused that fear and that situation in our life, that anxiety. We look at it and we say, oh, it's clean now. We understand it for what it truly is and what it truly was. And now we're going to take that clean energy and put it into ourselves and say, these are the solutions. This is how I'm going to now handle this issue. This is the beautiful part, folks. This is where we find solutions to our issues in this state of mind, in our second state, right? Because we can address our issues without all of the normal physical senses that constantly are distracting us. We've talked about that over and over again. You can't think clearly if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you are in physical pain. All of the things that our physical body is doing, it's distracting us from thinking clearly. But in the second state, there is no physical body to distract us. So we see things clearly and we can deal with those issues, right? Now, this doesn't mean when you wake up that issue is going to be gone. It doesn't mean that your problem is going to be solved and everything is perfect. But what it does is it allows you to see it in a different light. It takes the enormity of that issue. It takes the enormity away. It lifts the weight off of you. And so when you wake up, you might have been able to maybe think of a solution. Oh, this is how I needed to fix that thing. That's happened to me multiple times. I've gone through and listened to a tape, usually one where I'm just kind of exploring on my own, thinking about an issue on my own instead of having Dr. Monroe, talk you through these things. In future episodes, there's a tape where he just allows you to explore, and he says, hey, remember why you're listening to this tape. Why did you turn this tape on? Remember it, and now go find your answer. And so I've listened to that tape over and over again, and you find those solutions. Oh, that's what I needed to do. That's the small tweak here or there. Whether it's an issue of dealing with your computer and, creating the Mind War studio and making art, things like that. Or is it an emotional issue that you're dealing with, right? Some kind of more abstract issue that you're going to deal with. You can do it in that locale as well. So Dr. Monroe has you do this 3 separate times, 3 different issues, right? So again, it's very powerful. I don't recommend doing this too often, maybe once a quarter at most. If you find yourself constantly being in a stressed situation over and over again, new things are coming up in your life, then maybe once a quarter. For the rest of us, maybe once a year, right? But again, I think it's going to lose its potency if you listen to it over and over again and maybe are addressing the same fear over and over, or you go in and you look in the box and it's like, well, it's empty because I've kind of dealt with all of these things already. So that's just something to remind, a reminder. Wave 1, tape 4, not necessarily one you want to listen to over and over. I would say once a year. It would be perfect. And so one quick note that I wanted to say from when I was listening to this tape a few days ago, towards the end, when Dr. Monroe starts to walk you back, because it's the same as every other tape, he says, hey, I'm going to count down from 10 to 1. When I do, you're going to feel revitalized and energized. Your body is going to be functioning perfectly. Your emotions are going to be functioning perfectly. When he comes back on and starts talking, because there's a space and time where he just allows you to kind of float there, right? You're kind of taking a few deep breaths after dealing with your 3 fears that you pulled out of your energy conversion box after you've converted that issue, right? And he says, hey, take a minute just to relax before I wake you up. And so when he comes back on the mic, it startled me, right? I physically felt my body twitch. I had the headphones on maybe a little too loud, so when his voice came back on, it startled me. And what was so interesting is that my body produced just a jolt of adrenaline, right? Just like if you get scared in real life, that's what happens, right? Now, this is what was strange because, again, I'm in my second state. I'm in my second body. I'm in this deep, relaxed state of mind. So when this chemical, this adrenaline burst through my system, my second body just lit up like white electricity. It was just flowing, right? I could not only feel it in my physical body, but I could feel it in my second body too. And it came in the form of bright white energy, okay? And this is great because as we go into future episodes and go and listen to future tapes, that is one of the things that you're going to do. You're going to purposely be recharging your second state body and allowing it to glow with fresh, white, clean energy, right? Recharging it. It's an amazing feeling, right? But again, I thought that was interesting, being startled and having that adrenaline flow through me while I was in the second state. It was very cool. So that was it for today's episode. Episode 4, season 3 here in Mind War. Again, we're reading from Journeys Out of the Body. Today we went through chapters 5 and 6. And we looked at tape Wave 1 Discovery, tape 4 Release Recharge. A great tape. It is one that I want you to take time and prepare for. So here's a perfect example. If you're someone who throughout the week are listening to the tapes multiple times, here's what you can do. Go back, listen to tape 2, then tape 3, and only listen to tape 4 once over this next week until the next episode. I don't think you should be listening to this multiple times this week. Go back, get the refresher course, because again, tape 1 and tape 3, those are great refreshers. Dr. Monroe are teaching us the basics. That's a great way to do it. And again, I would love to hear from you. I would love to know what type of experience you're having. Did this tape work for you? Were you able to address some emotions and concerns that you didn't even really consciously know about, that more kind of bubbled up from the surface, more of a subconscious type issues, right? And that's what we're doing here. So whether you reach out to me or other friends that you're working in your first Earth Battalion and you're doing this work with, please reach out to them. Make sure you're sharing your stories. And as always, folks, remember, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.